Good afternoon, Porch family. How are you all doing this evening? We're running a few minutes late, but we are here, so you all come on in. I'm going to give you all a few minutes to come on in. As you all coming in, I'm going to tag some of you on in. Okay, you all, we are going to go ahead on and get started. We have on the porch this evening gubernatorial candidate Mr. Jimmy Blake on the porch this evening. He is running as a libertarian for the governor for the state of Alabama, and I'm just going to turn it over to him, so because some of you all don't know what the libertarian is, and so he can explain that to you all. And just let him introduce himself and, some of his plans, and let you know, because they don't, a lot of people don't know what that is.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jimmy Blake, and thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate very much being here on the porch with you today.
Okay.
Let me just say that just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Auburn, right down the road, so I know this area pretty well. Went to high school and college at Auburn. Got my medical doctor degree in Birmingham a long time ago. After that, I did a surgical internship down in Mobile, and then served 3 years in the U.S. Air Force as a flight surgeon in an F-4 squadron. So I got a lot of time flying Phantom jets and had a fun time living in Europe during that period. Came back, started a family practice in Birmingham area. A number of years ago, I ran for the Birmingham City Council, and when I was chairman of the Libertarian Party, in fact, and I served 2 terms on the Birmingham City Council. I quit after 2 terms because that's what I said I would do, but I wouldn't be there more than 2 terms. And so I did that, and then went back into practicing primarily. Well, I did family practice, and then after my wife was killed in a car accident, I started doing primarily emergency medicine, mostly in rural hospitals where, in Centerville and in Fayette, Alabama, very rural hospitals, and been retired for a couple of years. And when the Libertarian Party came and said, we're on the ballot this time, although I've been a member of the Libertarian Party since 74.
Okay.
So quite a while. I haven't been active. I've been living sort of a hermit's life out on the Warrior River, way out west of Jefferson County. And they came and said, we're on the ballot, and we want to stay on the ballot. And it's very difficult to get on the ballot. The Democrats and the Republicans have made it very difficult for anybody to challenge them. They've sort of gotten together and decided that, this seat's going to be for the Democrats and this seat's going to be for the Republicans. And, it's basically collusion and made it very difficult. The reason you don't see any choice is because they made it almost impossible to get on the ballot. The last time we were on the ballot as a party was 2002. What happened then is John Sophocleus, who is now our Senate candidate, ran for governor, and he got enough votes that it confused who the winner was going to be. First they said that Sigelman won, and then they flipped it after the Republicans moved around a little bit down in Baldwin and Mobile counties, and they changed it to Riley had won the election. Well, the bottom line was John had gotten more votes than what separated those two, and it caused a lot of confusion. And as a result of that, primarily the Republicans wanted to make it where we couldn't get on the ballot anymore. So they increased the signature requirement. It cost us about $300,000 to get on the ballot, to collect the 80-something thousand petitions that we did. Yeah, we'd like to have that now to campaign with, but it cost us a bunch of money. Well, because I have been very active politically in the greater Jefferson County area and had been on the media market up there and have considerable name ID still, they asked me to run for governor. And the real focus is this lady right here, Ruth Page Nelson, who is our lieutenant governor candidate. And Ruth does not have a Democrat opponent. So she is our best chance of getting enough votes. She has to get a minimum of 20% of the vote in the governor's race in order that we will continue to be qualified as a party to be on the ballot for the next 2 cycles, next 4 years. Okay, so we're working real hard to get Ruth on the ballot. Truthfully, if Democrats would vote for Ruth on the Libertarian ticket, then she could actually win and beat the Republican, because we're going to get a significant number of the Republican votes. They sometimes ask the Democrats just to pull the lever for the Democrat. Well, if you do that, we've got 65 people running statewide in the state of Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Of those, 50 are running against only a Republican or only a Democrat. So if they weren't on the ballot, it shows you how blank, there would be no election for those 50 positions. If people pull just a Democratic lever, they're not going to be voting in most of the races. So it's critically important. In particular here, this lady, Ruth Page Nelson, is running against just a Republican. And if people can pull the lever for Democrat, or they can pull the lever for Republican, but they can then go down and vote for Ruth Page Nelson. Now, don't think I don't want your vote, because I do. I hope you'll vote for Jimmy Blake for governor, and I hope you'll vote for John Sophocleus for lieutenant governor, and I wish you'd vote for Frank Dillman here in your county. So we've got libertarians all over the place. But that's basically why I'm in the race. I sort of left my retirement and came out, and as you know, I'm biking around Alabama trying to get people's attention, and we're kind of having fun with that and help to keep an old man in good shape. So, I'm glad to be on the porch. If you ask me what a libertarian is, the bottom line is we believe in the sovereignty of the individual. All individuals have the rights to their own life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness, and I basically describe a libertarian as kind of a good neighbor. They mind their business, they're self-responsible, they're not constantly asking you to bail them out of whatever problems they get into. But on the other hand, if your barn caught on fire, they'd come over and help you. And they're not gonna steal from you, and they're not gonna vote to have somebody else steal for you and give money to them. A libertarian is a good neighbor who believes that, government is best, that governs least, and that we, by and large, are able to manage our own affairs. The average person in this country now is spending about 40% of what they earn on government at one level or another, state, local, federal, in terms of taxes, in terms of fees, in terms of licensure fees, and all of these things are money being sucked out of the family and given to government to hand out to special people. That's what we want to stop. We want to stop that. We want people to be able to earn their money and keep their money to the maximum extent possible. That's really the bottom line.
Okay. Well, how do y'all feel about bringing the lottery to Alabama? What is your thoughts on that?
If people want a lottery, and I wish they'd put a clean lottery bill up. And, unfortunately, the lottery bills we voted on in the past created special groups of people who controlled it and controlled the money. I would like to have a lottery bill, if we're going to have one, that goes to get rid of the income tax in Alabama. Our surrounding state, if we're going to be competitive, we got to have a competitive tax environment.
Excuse me, sir, can you talk up a little bit?
Am I not speaking loud enough?
They said they can't.
Lord, I thought everybody thought I spoke plenty loud, but
You don't hear that very often.
I'll get a little
just
closer.
pull the chair up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I got it turned up as high as it'll go. Y'all
Well, whoever sent us that message, thank you. We certainly want people to be able to hear us. You asked me about the lottery bill.
Yes.
I'd love to have a clean lottery bill that goes to getting rid of the income tax in Alabama. The income tax in Alabama starts at $9,000. So anybody who does anything is paying the income tax. We should start at the bottom and get rid of it, and then gradually phase out the income tax. I'd love to see that. And so I don't, if people want to gamble, like with casinos and stuff, I don't advise people to do that. I mean, I'm a doctor. I don't advise people to do a lot of things that they want to do that aren't particularly smart or healthy. But if people want to do it, they have a perfect right to do it. But what we don't want is to give, like they did with this medical marijuana bill. You know, they're going to allow medical marijuana. But what are they going to do? They've got this special committee that's going to pick 6 special people.
That's why I'm confused there. I'm like,
yeah. I mean, well, the bottom line is it's going to be another year or two because of all the bureaucracy involved. But they're going to create this special bureaucracy which is going to pick 6 people who are the only winners in the thing, you know, that are going to be the ones that have to get to raise the marijuana, make the marijuana, sell it at dispensaries, totally regulated.
Is that the whole state of Alabama?
The whole state of Alabama, there'll be
state.
6 organizations that get to make all the money,
What?
and everybody else is going to pay a much higher price because of that. Well, look, if you want to legalize cannabis, or you know, I ain't got a big problem with it, but you know, and if we're going to do gambling, I would say, if you want a casino gambling, I want every gas station in Macon County to have a slot machine if they want one. I want every convenience store in Macon County to have a slot machine if they want one. I don't want to do it for just a few special people. I want it to be available where small business can take advantage of it, not the way we do things in Alabama, which is invariably for a few special, well-to-do folks, okay? And I would tell you that the same big mules, the big people, the special interests that used to run this state when they were wearing the blue Democrat banner flag are now running it when they're running the red Republican banner. There's nothing's changed except the color of the jersey in terms of who's benefiting. And that's why we need to change Alabama, and that's why I'm running for governor of Alabama. And if folks if they want to see something different, they're going to have to change their behavior. If they just vote by party rather than voting by people who are principled people, then we're going to continue to get what we've been getting, which is the shaft.
well, do we have any? Are there any libertarians in office now?
Well, when I was elected to the Birmingham Council, I was chairman of the Libertarian Party in Alabama. So in Alabama right now, I don't think there are any in office.
Like in the Senate, the Congress.
Not right now.
Okay.
Not. Okay. Now I'm confident that there will be after this election. If your folks will come out and vote for Ruth Page Nelson for lieutenant governor, we might really flip the state around a little bit, because she's a very sharp black lady who's running as a libertarian and does not have Democratic opponents.
What do you how do you feel about the Medicaid expansion and explain that to some, because some of us we don't know about.
Well, I don't know that I'm the best one to explain it. I would simply say that I'm a physician, and one of the real problems with health care is that it's so outrageously regulated and the government is so involved in it. So I'm typically not in favor of getting the government more involved in health care. I'd like to get the government out of health care, and I would like, look, after we just went through this COVID pandemic, I'm not necessarily, I don't come on and say I'm Dr. Blake anymore, like I one time did, because frankly, I'm embarrassed with the way the medical establishment handled this pandemic. I think thousands of people died because we didn't treat people with medicines that we had good reason, we knew they were safe, okay, the medicines that we could have used, and a lot of people, there were these underground doctor groups who really did treat people and got good results. But it was all about the vaccine, which we were told was 96% effective. We now know it's minimally effective at best. That we were told was safe. We now know it wasn't safe. There were thousands of people. And the thing that makes you really realize that they knew it wasn't safe is the fact that the first thing they did was to get a bill through Congress in Washington that made it where they could not be held responsible if you got the immunization and it made you sick. Now, I've never seen that, before. That's something that's only for these special pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer. I wouldn't trust Dr. Fauci on if I had a gun to his head. I mean, I've never seen more fear-mongering and trying to create hysteria in people, or wearing these silly cloth masks that we all know don't do any good, and very likely in children in particular could do harm. So I'm not it's just, getting the government and getting, the worst thing that's happened in this country in the last few years is that we really started to end our ability to have free speech. And there's no place where it does more harm than in the sciences, and certainly the science of medicine. If I get on your show right now and I mention a certain pharmaceutical company that starts with a P, they're liable to take it off the internet. So you can't show it. Now tell me we still live in a free country. It's time for folks to get together and realize, it's in everybody's interest that we have freedom of speech. It's in everybody's interest that we do have free inquiry in health care, in all sciences, in medicine. It's in everybody's interest that no doctor is afraid he's going to lose his license because he does what he thinks is in the best interest of his patient. And trust me, that has happened way too many times.
Right.
Yeah.
Education. What would be your stance on improving our education system here in Alabama, particularly public school system?
Well, look, absolutely, and I call it the government school system. And what we've done in Alabama and across this country, it reminds me of how they used to quote fix Soviet agriculture. Do you remember back when they had every 5 years they had a new 5-year plan, and the 5-year plan said throw more money at it, regulate it, and get more bureaucrats involved, and that's the solution. Of course, 5 years later, it was worse than it had been, and we've done that over and over and over. The way we're going to improve schools is the same way we get excellence in anything in a free society, which is bring market forces to bear. If your child is in a school that is systematically not educating children, I would say that we should attach the money to the parent and the child and let them purchase an education that they think is best for their student. Now, when I ran for city council, I guess in 1992, I did a position paper on school choice and a voucher system. It's the only thing that would do anything to fix the Birmingham City schools, which have been, it's criminal what we're doing there. A lot of young people are not getting the most basic education. And I'm going to tell you, it was bad in 92. It's far worse now, because now they're wanting to treat, they're basically got this sociological agenda rather than teaching children math and reading and social studies and science, which is what we should be teaching. And we're teaching all kind of crazy stuff,
Okay. This is the hot topic, and I don't know if you want to speak on it. What are your thoughts and concerns about women's rights? When they overturned the Wade.
Well, libertarians are about people having a right to their own lives and their own bodies all the time. Okay. Now, as governor, I would be required to take an oath to defend the Constitution and laws of the state of Alabama, and as governor, that's what I would do. Okay. Now, where am I on it? I think we're talking about the abortion question.
Right.
Okay. Now, I will be the first to tell you that spiritually, I'm very pro-life. I'm so pro-life, I don't believe in the death penalty, because I think humans make too many mistakes. People get convicted that really didn't do the crime. Okay. But so spiritually, I'm pro-life. Okay. On the other hand, we don't live in a theocratic society. We're not going to make our political decisions based on somebody's religion. And the problem with this question is that no matter who you are, you have to recognize at some point in the process, there are two individuals, mother and infant or embryo, whatever you want to call it, whose rights the government should defend. So the question then becomes, and it's really proper that it should be up to each individual state to do that. And we may have 50 different approaches to that in 50 different states. And we used to celebrate that. We called it laboratories of democracy. The states had their different approaches to things. So the bottom line is we've had 49 years of radicalism. It's been turned around. Now it's back in the proper place, which is at the state level. And we in Alabama are going to figure out where we start recognizing the rights of mother and embryo, i.e., right now it's essentially conception, except in the case of the life of the mother. Okay, I think when this all went haywire, when Roe versus Wade came through, I think at that point we were. I know there were exceptions for rape and incest, and I think the vast majority of people in Alabama would favor that. I think some people might favor further along in the process. I don't know the answer. You know, I don't pretend to know the answer. I know I'll defend the laws of the state of Alabama if I'm governor, and I would like for us to sit down and just have an intelligent discussion about it, which we have not had.
Exactly. Gun violence in Alabama and the new gun law, I think it comes in effect, January with the permits and stuff?
Well, what they call constitutional carry goes into effect in January, and
Okay.
that is to say you don't have to have a permit to carry a weapon. Okay, that's really what that means, and frankly, that's where the Constitution is. I don't think the problem is the guns.
Right.
I think the problem is that we are not bringing children up to value their lives and the lives of other people, and I think we've got a lot of work to do there, and that's really something that, you know, I don't think it's really up to the government schools to teach ethics. It's really, I mean, that certainly should set an example, but it's really up to the parents to do that, and it's very dangerous if your children don't have respect for their own lives and the lives of other people.
Would you be open to putting more resources and money into mental health? We got such a mental health problem here in Alabama, and drug abuse problem. It's not, you know, not a lot of facilities like you go there for 30 or 40 days, sometimes 7 days. How would you deal with the mental and drug illnesses?
Well, one thing that we've gotten away from in our society is, you know, there was a time when everybody was involved with spiritual churches and
Right.
whatnot, and churches and preachers did a lot of work in this area, and I really think that we need to be more supportive of each other in a society, and I don't think we do that. You know, I don't think we do that.
Okay. And but what do you have any concerns about voting rights and, you know, the rezoning kind of stuff that they did?
I do. I have considerable concerns about it. You know, it's real simple. If they're so sure that our process is fair and open, then why don't they open the process, if you will? In other words, my advice would be that we have paper ballots for every election. Okay. I think that every candidate, the losing candidate, should be able to pick one or two voting machines and say, I want a physical count of that machine. Okay? If they do that and they find the discrepancies, then they ought to count every machine. And I think nothing would do more to ensure the integrity of the process than that. Now, there are other issues like mail-in voting, voter harvesting, some of those issues that we still need to have more control over. But the biggest issue is I'm worried that, you know, the number that machine shows or for Jimmy Blake may not be the number that are for Jimmy Blake. And the way that you could prove that to me and to everybody else is to have a physical count, not of all the ballots, of just one or two precincts that I request, or one or two machines that I get the option of doing. And then every candidate has the same responsibility, same rights. That's what, you know, they always say everything's fine, but they never go back and count the ballots. You know, they only count what the machine is showing, and that's crazy. I mean, that doesn't assure you of anything.
Right. If elected governor of the state of Alabama, what would be your 6-month goal and your long-term goals?
I'd like to come up with a plan that we can agree on that would do something to really address the most chronic problems that we have, and education is probably the most chronic problem. I would like to do something to make it where upward mobility is back into the system, and that would be to get rid of so many of the occupational licenses requirements, get rid of all the things that get in the way of folks starting a small business, whether it's a home business or whatever, license fees, all that kind of stuff. I'd like to get rid of the taxes, the income taxes. And I would start at the lowest level and try to move all the way to the top, because we're not going to be able to be competitive in Alabama financially if we are surrounded by Florida, which doesn't have an income tax, Tennessee doesn't have an income tax, Mississippi is phasing theirs out, Georgia gave huge tax rebates to the reductions to their people this time. And in Alabama, what did we do? Minimal tax cuts that just so they could say they did. It didn't amount to nothing. We increased the gas tax, and they're still saying, well, they might give us a rebate. Well, I don't want a rebate. I want a long-term fix to make us competitive. And if we don't do that, all we're going to do to get new business is what we've been doing to get these big businesses, which is basically give them a bunch of money that's my money and your money that we paid in, and they're given to these special companies to have them come into Alabama. That's not government should be fair to everybody, not just to the super wealthy.
Do you have any ideas or anything on how they can fix the prison system here in Alabama?
We're going to go to the breaking all chains of the end of Montgomery tomorrow.
Okay.
And we'll be discussing that in detail. Our governor, Kay Ivey, is taking that federal money that was supposed to go to COVID relief, she's destroyed all kind of businesses in Alabama by shutting them down and basically bankrupting so many small businesses. So many people have been hurt. So many people have been hurt by the vaccine, okay? That money ought to be going to make the people whole who were hurt by what the governor did here in the state of Alabama, the small businesses, the people who were hurt by vaccine, and so on. What did she do? First off, she went on television and tried to shame people who didn't want to take that vaccine. And I bet there are a lot of people in this community who were very suspicious of that vaccine. Yeah. And there's a history of that, isn't there?
Syphilis study.
You got it, sister. And that's just what I was about to say. There's a reason that people don't trust the FDA, the CDC, the Institute of Health, because you can't trust them. They don't tell the truth. It's just that simple. So, and I forgot what, the prisons. I got off the topic on preaching about something I like to preach about. But several things about the prisons. First of all, that money should be going to COVID relief, not building two mega prisons to enhance the prison industrial complex in Alabama. People are making money on throwing people in jail. They're getting federal money, $53 a day per inmate or whatever it is. It's crazy. And, it's a business now to throw people in jail. This country has, the free country that we're supposed to live in has got more people locked up than on a percentage basis than any country in the world, okay? I think that the justice system should be about justice. If somebody robs you, takes your money, steals money from your bank account, they call it a crime against the state. I wouldn't call it that. I'd call it a crime against you, okay? And I think that the justice system should be about making the victim whole. So instead of throwing somebody in jail, if you could come to an agreement with the person who had wronged you with the support of the government, obviously the government would say, okay, come to an agreement with her, or we're going to put you in jail, or we're going to do whatever we're going to do, all right? And, okay, they agree to pay you $100 a week, whatever it takes to make you whole. I think the justice system should be about making the victims whole, not throwing people in prison so that people can make money off having folks in prison.
Okay. And in closing,
you heard all you want to hear.
Well, no, I don't know your schedule, but I do need you to go back, because at first they could not hear, and they just asked me, could you reintroduce yourself, your name and stuff, because they could, we couldn't get it. They said all the birds were chirping and it was low. They couldn't hear it.
We have a couple birds around here chirping. I am Dr. Jimmy Blake. I grew up in Auburn. I went to high school and college in Auburn. Then I went to University of Alabama in Birmingham. I got my medical degree. I was on an Air Force scholarship to go to medical school. So after doing an internship in Mobile, I was in the Air Force, and I got transferred to Europe, and I served over in Europe as a flight surgeon in a F-4 squadron, a tactical fighter squadron called the Phantom Jet. Got several hundred hours in jets, loved it, had a great time. After doing my tour of duty in the Air Force, I came back and started doing both emergency medicine and family practice in the Hoover area. Did that for a number of years. Early in the 90s, I was chairman of the Libertarian Party at that point in Alabama, and I ran for city council in Birmingham, and I was elected to the Birmingham City Council. I served 2 terms there. I was fairly controversial because I really scared what happened and let people know. I led there were a bunch of special people. One of the things I guess I feel like was the most significant thing I did was a bunch of special people wanted to build a dome stadium, and they wanted to tax everybody in Jefferson County a penny sales tax to build this stadium. And they had basically it was the fix was in. They had every member of the legislature, the county commission, I guess 8 out of 9 votes on the city council, the newspapers, the radio and television. Everybody was for it. I had studied this issue of using tax money to build sports facilities. It didn't matter whether it was a liberal think tank, a conservative think tank, a libertarian think tank. They all agreed that these were not good deals for any community. So I led the opposition. They kicked it off with this big whoop-de-doo. And in fact, I was interviewed by Paul Feinbaum, of all people, who now is national, but he used to be in Birmingham. And I said to Paul, I said, no. I said, this is about Dome and Domer. And we started an opposition campaign. Well, didn't take long before, I got somebody to run against a couple of the county commissioners, and before long the county commissioners were running away from, oh, no, we're not for that. And the other side spent about $1.5 million. We spent about $35,000, and we beat them 62% of the votes. So after about, I must have given hundreds of speeches, but it went on for about 6 or 8 months. And the bottom line is we won. And as a result of that, the people in Jefferson County are saving $75 million a year so that would be about $100 million a year since 1998 that the taxpayers have saved. That's the kind of thing I'd like to do in Alabama, because think about that. We're talking well over $1 billion that would have been sucked out of the economy and go to a bad purpose, and people got to keep their own money and spend it the way they saw fit to fit it. And like I said earlier, most people nowadays are spending anywhere from 30 to 40 or more percent of what they earn on taxes, licenses, or whatever. And I don't believe there's a soul out there that thinks they're getting their money's worth out of it. So what do we do? Why don't we quit doing what we've been doing and try something different? And that might be to elect libertarians to office. And I'm Jimmy Blake. I'm running for governor. This is John Sophocleus, who's an economist from Auburn. He's running for the U.S. Senate. Do we want to put a lobbyist in the U.S. Senate? That's the alternative. Streamline political corruption. Put a lobbyist in the Senate. Cut out the middleman. That's crazy, okay? Or, most importantly, Ruth Page Nelson. Ruth is running for lieutenant governor. She does not have a Democratic opponent. So, pull whatever lever you want, but if you want to do that, but go down the ballot, find Ruth Page Nelson, vote for her. She could be, very likely, our next lieutenant governor, and boy, would that rock the Alabama world. Thank you so much for having me.
And we got one more question.
Let's shoot.
Ms. Richardson wants to know, if you become governor, how would you help rebuild surrounding areas like, of course, here Tuskegee, with businesses, healthcare, renovations, jobs, and other ventures?
Well, again, when you create an environment where people want to come, if there are people here who are educated and are ready to take the jobs, if the cost of doing business is reasonable, which is to say that the government's not getting in the way so damn much, okay?
Right.
If if this is a good opportunity for somebody to bring a business, they'll bring a business. Okay? If it's not, they're not going to. So the best thing we can do is to make it a business-friendly environment. And I'm not talking about big business. I'm talking about somebody who wants to, do hair.
Like
or
a mom and pop shop.
Anything. I was meeting with a guy at the Capitol yesterday, and they're from G's Men, okay? And they are making carpets. They're making quilts. They're making quilts and selling them. I mean, just beautiful quilts. But it's just a house or cabin industry, and they're selling those quilts for thousands of dollars. Okay, there are so many ways that people can do things and be creative, but when you've got all the obstacles that are in the way, the obstacles just figuring out how to pay your taxes, for heaven's sakes. How much do we spend on accountants to keep us out of trouble with the tax man? There's so much we could do to make it where business. And the thing that really disturbs me, and this is particularly important in poor communities or minority communities. There was a time when this was a free country and a free economy, and that was a time when America was exploding. We were setting an example for the world. We didn't have these obstacles, and the notion of upward mobility was what everybody assumed for their children. You can't hardly assume that anymore because we don't have the opportunities we once had. And that's an issue of getting government out of the way, and bureaucrats and regulators.
Okay, well, do you have anything that you want to say in closing that, we didn't touch on?
Well, yeah, I hadn't said War Eagle. I guess I'll say
I was going to ask you that. You went to Alabama and you grew up in Auburn.
I went to Auburn and Alabama, and I pulled for them both.
So War Roll.
War. Oh, Lord. Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful opportunity to be here, and it was nice to be able to bike up. What a pretty day for biking today. I don't know if people know, I'm biking across Alabama. So
okay.
Yeah, and we're putting that out on our website. Go to votelibertyalabama.com and you can learn a little bit more about me and the other 60 some odd libertarian candidates on the ballot. And we've got Frank Dillman running for office right here in Macon County. How big is your audience? Macon County primarily, or is it all over the place?
Everywhere. It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing it long enough. It doesn't take long, does it? Right. Well, it's been wonderful. If anybody has any other questions, get in touch. We'll try to answer them, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we get John to introduce himself?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, bring John in here and introduce him if you would.
And wait a minute, let me turn around. And now we're going to introduce John. What's that name? Sophocles. He is running for the U.S. Senate. So I'm going to let you tell a little bit about yourself to the audience there.
I'm going to try and be brief. He's a hard show to follow. And I've got to take my hat off.
Can y'all hear that?
Waiting for my mama to whop me on the back of the head. You don't keep your hat on around a lady. I'm an instructor of economics. I taught at Clemson for about 3 years and Auburn for 27 years. I'm sorry about that Auburn thing.
Oh.
I have somewhat of a different perspective in that I look at the world with respect to how many people are benefiting from the economic environment that really ought not be benefiting from it because they use the government. When Dr. Blake was talking about my run for governor, one of the big issues that we made was something called the Williams case. Libertarians make a big deal about property rights. The Williams family lived in the Black Belt. They lived in Marengo County. And the Alabama State Lands Division came along and said, well, this was designated wetland by the federal government. You need to go. And they were, I guess, a little bit nice. They said, you can live on it until you die, but you can't farm or log it. Well, I don't know how you think about that, Ms. Hamilton. Can't farm or log it sound like swampland to you? So we went through the record, and our own state lands division in the record in court said, well, we just don't think the Negro family should have their land.
Oh, my.
We made such a big deal about it that Governor Sigelman patented the land back to the Williams family the day before the primary. And it upset him quite a bit. And It was supposed to have a blue ribbon panel, return all that property that was wrongfully taken, set up blue ribbon panels. Never did ask an economist like me or my friends to get involved with it, try and make those folks whole. Well, they had the audacity after they did that to say, well, are you happy with that, libertarians? I said, well, it's a nice start, right? But the Williams family didn't have use of their property from 1967 to 2002. You think that made them whole, just giving it back to them? So we said, why don't you repair what some folks would say reparations for that time where you didn't have that land? Well, we were being unreasonable. I think that being one of the bigger issues that we made, I don't think they wanted to see us on the ballot again. And they've been successful for 20 years not having us on the ballot again. We had major party status in 2002. A federal judge said, oh, Alabama Public Television, even though you get state and federal money, you can discriminate against those libertarians. You don't have to have them on the show. They're just libertarians. So there's a lot of efforts being made for us not to be on the ballot. And I don't want to keep your listeners, bless their heart, or probably...
Oh, no, you're fine.
When you run for federal office, there are certain things that you see in your purview. And I spent a lot of time with this thing in my pocket. When somebody says, I want you to consider something, I say, great. Tell me Article X, Section Y, Clause Z, where I'm authorized to do it, and I'm all ears. And I think that gets folks to say, well, nobody talks like that. Well, if that's not the way to talk about it, I don't know what is. So take, for instance, education that y'all were talking about before I sat down.
Right.
There's no authorization for the federal government to be in education. If they're going to be in it, understand the problem. This is what economists like to call the leaky bucket. So they take a dollar out of Alabama, the bucket leaks, all that administration, up to D.C. Then it comes from D.C. back to Alabama, the bucket leaks again, and they tell you what to do with that money. Some estimates say for every dollar that comes back, cost our school system to actually have to adhere to the stuff that they want to do. And in my opinion, the local folks have a lot better idea of what they want their youngins to be learning than some vendor up in D.C. that's trying to get their textbook adopted, what some folks like to call Common Core, which are a bunch of standards and all that that are going to be adopted that make a lot of money for some big corporation specific group. Another thing, and I'm hoping to meet with Cam Ward over at the Pardon and Paroles Board, is the prison problem that's going on here. I, for the life of me, can't understand why Myron Thompson, the federal judge, has allowed this to just continue on and on. One of the most rewarding things I've ever done as a teacher is actually going into the prisons and teach. Okay. And you can't imagine the forms you have to sign, and if you get killed or hurt or no recourse, all that other sorts. So you've got to really love what you're doing to do that. And what I'm hoping as a federal candidate, working with Cam Ward, is so if we're going to have the federal government in education and those dollars, why aren't those dollars being shared uniformly across all our Alabama people? Just because you go into prison doesn't mean you're a person anymore, right? You're still a human being that is worthy of investment and being done right.
Right.
I think what I felt really drawn to that program, Ms. Hamilton, is the recidivism rate for folks who go through our prison program education is reduced immensely. It's almost 85% lower. So there's two things that I see to solve that prison problem. First, we've got all these nonviolent offenders, and when I first ran for federal office in the 90s, and I'd say all federal drug laws are unconstitutional, folks looked at me like I was nuts. How can you talk like that? Well, how do I know? When the federal government wanted to have the war on alcohol, what did we do? We amended the Constitution. That's what gave us the 18th Amendment. Everybody got to see how stupid it was. Crime went crazy. Buying alcohol from, some unscrupulous person, you had no recourse if they got poisoned or blinded and all that other sort of stuff. Well, we saw how stupid it was. What do we do the Constitution again? The 21st Amendment, and we amended and undo it. So I think that most folks don't appreciate how much their lives would improve if the federal government did those few things that it's authorized to do really well and got out from the things that they do that are generating just huge amounts of problems. I know I didn't start where you like to start, so you know who I am and a little bit about myself.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and to just a wonderful Southern mama. She loved to sing in a gospel group called All God's Children, and you know, it really was a nice cross section. A lot of times she'd be the only white lady in the group. She made sure that I knew how the melody and how to sing, lift every voice and sing, and all that good stuff. Grew up Greek Orthodox, and some of y'all may remember that the head of our church, Yakovos, was at Selma, walking across with Martin Luther King. I've gotten older now and driving, so I go to church to Green Chapel Missionary Baptist Church. Pastor Roland Austin, I think some folks here in Tuskegee may know, who I hold dear. It was sad to see the churches closed because of COVID. We just had our first vacation Bible study this last summer, and you know, did a great job on the 22nd and the 23rd Psalm, which was just wonderful. A lot of folks complain about COVID. There was COVID and then the COVID response, and the response was much worse than the COVID. And a little bit more about myself. I'm a Lee County Commission Watcher, which Frank Dillman does a lot of the same things here in Macon County. They were supposed to come up with the 5 top things to address with the COVID money that came in. Not one person said, give money to the churches, help them be able to get the social structure and media and all that in place to deal with it. Not one of them. So I got up and I said, you know, nice to hear all your ideas. You want to put in lighting and roads to parks and all that. You could be outside during COVID. Who you harmed the most were the churches. They don't want to hear that. They close the comments, don't allow folks to talk, and we really need to stop corruption at the lowest level. One of the things I would just absolutely be over the moon to do if I was a United States Senator is when somebody like Frank calls me and says, they won't investigate this, they won't give me records on that. I'm going to make one phone call and say, Frank, here it is. Go expose them. Go stop it. Frankly, I think there's a lot of stuff going on in both of our counties where the FBI is just dropping the ball. They need to come in and investigate misuse of federal funds.
Right.
All right, I've spoken way too long. You've been an absolute delight, and
That's okay.
What an honor to be here. And,
Okay.
And as he keeps holding up my card, I'm John Sophocles. I'm the United States Senate. Ruth, who I would love if she wasn't down in Dothan right now, were here with us. She's our lieutenant governor candidate, and she has no opponent. And we would be very happy to have you vote for Libertarians. I know many of you like to vote straight ticket. I think we're one of 6 states that still does that, Ms. Hamilton.
Yeah.
There's the misinformation that if you color in the bubble for the straight ticket, you can't vote anything down line. You can vote your straight ticket, but you can vote for Frank Dillman. You can vote for Ruth Page Nelson. It does not void your ticket. I wish the Secretary of State would make that more clear, but the parties do not.
I done learned something. Well, I done learned something then today. Okay.
Thank you once again for
All
being
right.
on. What an absolute delight to meet you and an honor to be on the porch.
Okay. Okay, you all. Thank you all for tuning in on this evening this afternoon with us here on the porch with our Libertarian candidates for governor and
U.S. Senate.
the U.S. Senate.
And Lieutenant Governor.
And Lieutenant Governor, she was not able to be here today, so I will be posting these cards on line later on. You all continue to enjoy your afternoon.